Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach, mates. Well, all the practice matches are done and dusted, and we are only 9 days out from round one now, which is a very exciting time of the year. Um, and also, because we're 9 days out from round one, it also means that we're having to start locking away our picks. And what we're going to do in this podcast is we're just going to go through a few of the sort of standout performers from the practice matches, and basically we're going to give you a verdict on which way we would be picking if we had to pick between sort of players similarly priced. Um, we've got both Thomas and Jonas here tonight. So we're going to just get started straight away. So the first matchup we've got here is Doherty versus Dawson. So obviously, I think a lot of us, myself included, have flicked between both of these two throughout the preseason sort of last few months. I might throw this one to you, Thomas. If you had to pick between these two, which one are you going for? And maybe just give a short reason why.
Yeah, it's a tough one because, we've obviously seen a fair few teams being sent through to us structure-wise. You can probably only pick one of it. Well, you can pick two of these realistically. Just depends on the structure-wise that you go and how deep you bat in other fields. Yeah, obviously with the stats on these ones, these are from the preseason games just gone by. You probably can't go wrong with either, to be fair. I think role-wise specifically, I'd go with Doherty. Just because if I was forced to pick between the two, I'd pick Doherty. Probably has a better role compared to Dawson. I know they're very similar roles, but the main difference I saw is that Dawson kind of plays a mix between he pushes up to a wing, kind of pushes up that ground and will get the ball obviously in the half back role. But Doherty, everything goes through him. Everything went through him in the preseason game. And he played pretty much that quarterback role or the architect for that Carlton defence. And yeah, that explains why he got a huge score. But everything went through the guy, and yeah, there was a bit of doubt on whether he played midfield or whatever. But it doesn't seem to be the case. And as soon as Cripps and Walsh are back round one, I don't think there's an issue with that. And I think he plays pretty much just behind the ball. And he gets most of he starts most of the play. So him and Sada, obviously the two off the half-back line, but he's one that kind of pushes just behind the contest and really is damaging by foot, and he's elite by foot as well. As you can see, 34 disposals, 154 Supercoach points. You can't go wrong.
Yep. Are you going to agree with Tom there, Jonas, or are you going to support your love child?
I think these are both two players you want in your final team, but I think it will be easier to pick up Dawson at a more discounted price earlier on in the season because Doherty's got a pretty good midfield sort of defense role, playing some good teams that he can score well against early on, whereas Dawson's got the Finn McGuinness tag in round 6, so he could cop a fair bit of attention that game and lose a bit of money. And then you could maybe pick him up at, say, 550 at some stage. So for that reason and that reason alone, I probably will lean towards Doherty if I had to pick just one. But at the moment, I like having both in my team. So, yeah, don't think you can really go wrong.
Yeah, so at the minute, I've got Doherty there at the minute, and I think I would have to pick him as well if I had a verdict here because he's been in my side more than what Dawson has. I think Dawson's sort of floated in and out a bit, whereas I think Doherty's pretty much been stable there since since the start of sort of maybe a month ago, 3 weeks ago. So, yeah, I think for mine, I'd go Doherty as well. Moving on, so we've got the next rung of defenders here, I believe. So I've got Nick Dacos and Jordan Ridley. So Dacos obviously copped the Finn McGuinness tag, as Jonas just alluded to, and Ridley looked back to his old role, albeit it was against St Kilda, and the ball did spend a lot of time down there. So Jonas, I might throw this one to you. Who are you picking out of these two?
It would be pretty easy to say Ridley purely based off the preseason game, but I think I'll still go Dacos just because there's upside with the fact that he's a year older, he's a bit stronger, he's got better endurance. In theory, Collingwood will be a stronger team, and we have a stronger midfield, so he should play a bit more in his preferred position, which is at the moment half back, and pinch hitting in the midfield. So I still think Dacos is probably the slightly better option. Ridley, there are a lot of people in that back line. You got Redmond, for instance, who could take a few points off him. So I'm still a bit uncertain about that, and also uncertain about how the Essendon game plan will play out. Like, they looked pretty ordinary on the weekend. Do they want to keep persisting with that sort of game style? I'm not sure. So for me, I think Dacos, even though he'll cop a fair few tags, he should still pump out some pretty good scores.
Yeah. Are you gonna go along with that, Thomas?
Yeah. It's a very tricky one, really, because you're basing it off one sample size. With Dacos and Ridley. Yeah, Dacos obviously copped the McGuinness tag, and it was a very, very tight one. And whoever McGuinness gets this year, I think, is in for a rough Supercoach score, regardless of the fact. And yeah, I think a lot of people have jumped ship with Dacos, but yeah, I think with the resurgence of the likes of Cumming and Ridley, it makes it hard not to pick them ahead of the likes of Dacos. On the flip side, Ridley had quite an easy game defensively, even though they got beaten by us. I mean, he didn't play against the most, efficient forward line in the world. We had pretty much a really second-rate forward line going on, so he really didn't have much opposition. I think he played on Philippou for half the game. So other than him playing an easier opposition, I think his role's still there. Or his old role is there. 12 marks, 27 disposals. Had a fair few kick-ins as well. I think, and I posted on Twitter beforehand about the kick-in stats. Let me just bring him up real quick.
Yeah, I think for Ridley, I think this is the big one for him if you're going to go down this path, is his kickouts.
I think there wasn't too many kickouts they had altogether, because obviously could have converted quite well. But out of the 5, Ridley took 2, Redmond took 2. So, whether it be seeing they split him up more, but it definitely seemed like he had his old role back rather than playing a half back defender 1-on-1 type. He was back to his kind of loose defender. The risk is that you got McGrath and Redmond, and we only saw one game, so a lot of people are jumping on because of that one game. So it's hard to say. And obviously, Dacos copped a McGuinness tag and still scored all right. 72 Supercoach points for a heavy tag game is actually pretty good. But I'd probably just roll alone, and the potential that maybe other teams might start nullifying Dacos a little bit. I'd say Ridley as well, just.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me, I think I would have to go Dacos here. I think you're looking at the future right now. I mean, David King thinks Dacos can win a Brownlow this year. So, if you can get a Brownlow potential, someone who might, if he doesn't cop tags, push for a Brownlow in his second year of 500k. I think I'd be perhaps going down that route. But look, I think either way, I don't think you can probably go wrong with both of them. I guess Dacos's role is probably a little bit better than Ridley's, given that he's probably not going to be stuck in the back pocket locking down on someone. But then on the flip side, he might cop some attention from from other taggers. So I think that's a watch and play. But I think based on exposed form, I think I would lean towards Dacos just on that one. We'll move on now to the next matchup, which is midfielders. So Laird and Oliver. So the two most expensive midfielders. In fact, I think they might even be the two most expensive players in the game this year. Obviously, Laird got 151 and was everywhere, and Oliver only got 95. Which way are you leaning here, Thomas?
Well, I've got Laird on my side, and I think Jonas has done the same. I think Jonas watched that game, the preseason game, and he went berserk, and he was off, barely 70% game time. So, yeah, he stepped up a notch, and I think the Adelaide side in general is a bit stronger than last year. They've fixed a few things up, and they've got a decent midfield starting to set up, and they've got a good forward line structure at the moment with Fogarty actually finding some form for once in his life. So, yeah, I think Laird in this one, you see there, 32 disposal. He just tackles for fun as well. Him getting tagged is even though he does, he just kind of he's been tagged before last year and he still scored hundreds. He just tackles his way out of it and he finds ways to find the ball. He's an elite midfielder and there's a reason why they put him back in there where he belonged off instead of half back. Oliver's an interesting one. He's you can see there 31 disposals and didn't crack the ton. He played a real pretty wishy-washy game, I'd say, real uncontested stuff. And even swapped with Brayshaw off half back, so Petrarca did a lot of the stuff forward of centre. Whether or not this is just Oliver in second gear and they're just protecting him a little bit before the start of the real season, is yet to be seen, but he's got a tough opening fixtures. He's got the Dogs first up as well. I mean, traditionally he's done all right against the Dogs, but he's known for his tackle pressure as well, and it wasn't evident on the weekend. But as I said, that could be just similar, to a Jack Steele where they might be just taking it a bit easier. But yeah, I'd say Laird on this one. There's not much of a price difference. It'd be a different conversation if you're pitting him up against someone like a Steele or someone a little bit different. But will you save yourself 100k or reinvest that money elsewhere? But Laird is, I think, the way to go out of those two in particular. With the uncertainty of how that midfield structure is going to work with the likes of the Ruckman and Brayshaw and Viney coming back eventually. You don't know how that structure is going to look like, but yeah, Laird I think is the way to go.
Are you in the Laird camp as well, Jonas?
Yeah, I've been firmly in this camp for a while. It's just he's far more consistent in terms of like going 120, 120, 120 rather than 150, 90. And he doesn't get tagged. So I think he's just the sort of option where if you pay up, you're not getting value, but you're getting someone at their price. Whereas with Oliver, he's the sort of player where he might spark a really good game, but then follow that up by two slightly mediocre games, which means you can pick him up at, say, a 620 at some stage in the year. So I don't want to be letting other people pick up a player that I started with at 70k cheaper. So yeah for me, it's Laird.
Yeah, well, I was actually firmly in the Oliver camp up until the games, and I did watch a bit of both of these games, and you have to say Laird was mighty impressive. The ball just seemed to be attached to him in those centre bounce work. I think he had like 8 clearances or something for the game. So yeah, I think the other thing too with Oliver, so last year I know he fell after about round 4 or something, and I think I got him at about 630 odd K. So I think he might start a bit slow, Oliver, whereas I think Laird came out of the blocks and scored like 500 or 620 pluses in a row to start the year. So yeah, I think out of these two, I think Oliver's probably the one I can see more likely to fall in price. So therefore, I think I would be jumping on the Laird bandwagon. Yeah, but I will say I have had Oliver a lot of the summer, but yeah, I think I'm gonna jump ship and pay the extra. I don't know what it is, like 3 or 4k, and go up to Roy Laird. So that's that one. Right, moving on to the next one. So Bont and Petrarca, two obviously damaging players, especially front of centre. Who are you picking here, Jonas?
For me, I'd see upside in Bontempelli with Dunkley leaving the midfield. And I think there are a few players who might enter the Melbourne midfield, like Pickett will pinch it in there. And Petrarca, I'm not sure if he's going to be a top 8 mid this year, whereas I'm pretty confident Bont will be a top 4 mid. So for me, this is a pretty straightforward decision. Yeah, Bontempelli.
Are you the same, Thomas, Bond here?
Yeah, Bont all the way. He has left my side. We know Champion Dad love him to bits. So, yeah, I think he's an easy pick. Obviously, Petrarca looks actually quite impressive. I saw a bit of that game on the weekend, and he's really damaging off forward of centre, and he seems to be the better of the two when it comes to the ruck tap outs in comparison to Oliver at the moment. He seems to be reading it quite well, and he's just really untaggable with him. He can play wherever. He's a freak. But having said that, yeah, Bont seemed on the weekend and be swapping with McRae in the rotations. I could see without Dunkley, they need that bigger body in there, so Bont will play majoritively midfield. I think they've got their forward structure sorted. There was some doubt with Bont potentially playing a bit more half forward, but now they've got Jamari, Ugelhagen, they've got Aaron Norton, they've got a plethora of options up forward.
Lob.
So yeah, Lob now as well. So unless 2 out of the 3 go down early, I can't see Bont staying out that going out of that midfield. He'll rotate obviously with McRae perhaps, and the likes of Trelaw and Bailey Smith. But yeah, Bont I think is the way to go. In this one, if you're forced between the two, Petrarca's a nice pod, especially if he pumps out a couple, 120s, 130s early doors. But yeah, Bont 27 disposals, 2 goals for a 150 performance against a pretty average North Melbourne lineup is what you expect against those sort of shitter teams for sure.
Yeah, I've had Bont now for probably as long as I've had Doherty, to be honest, probably 3 or 4 weeks now. I think he's just about the number one midfielder at this stage. I know that the Herald Sun released an article earlier today, and they think that he might end up as the number one midfielder. So if you can pay however much he's 629, I think he is, something around there, to get the number one midfielder, yeah, I think that's enough for me to grab him up. And I think the other thing too with Bont is, I think because he's had to spend time forward when he probably hasn't had to, I think he's sort of developed a bit of forward craft. So if he ever does get chucked forward, it might be more of a drifting type role, like maybe like Dustin Martin from Richmond, where he sort of starts in the middle, but then he has the freedom and the luxury just to drift forward. So yeah, I think he will probably be at most of the Bulldogs centre bounces this year, I would hope, considering I think he's probably their best clearance player now that Dunkley's gone. Yeah, so I am firmly in the Marcus Bontempelli camp on this one. So we've got a couple of sort of higher price rookies or mid prices here. So we've got James Warple and Finn Callaghan. I might throw this one to you, Jonas. Which one are you picking here?
I like the money you save on Callaghan. He's got, I think, after the weekend's performance on the wing, more job security. I'm still a bit unsold on Warple's job security, even though he's had 2 good games. He's still not the best kick, and I'm not sure if they will persist with him, but he did look pretty good, and he does have the better role. But if I had to pick one, it would be Callaghan, purely because 80,000 goes a long way in this game, or 70,000 or whatever you save. And I think, judging by how he scored the 111, 22 touches, he's really clean by foot, reads the play well, and I think GWS have to play him. They need to get games into these sort of players. So, yeah, for me, I'm going Callaghan, although the Warple option isn't bad because he does have the better role if he can keep it.
Are you, Thomas, are you in the Callaghan camp as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think Warple I'm not a huge fan of. In general, when it comes to Supercoach, I don't think his translation of possessions correlates with his touches. He's yet to be proven in a full season. I think I read somewhere that I think one of the coaches, I don't know if it was Mitchell or one of the assistant coaches, basically came out and said he's been most impressive pre-season. He's up there, already in BNF calculations with how good he's going. But I think he just butchers it a lot enough that it doesn't really correlate. I think Taranto, he's basically a B-Tech Taranto if you want to dumb it down. Taranto gets enough possessions to score, right, and you can have a bit of a goal threat. But yeah, Warple, I think, just isn't quite there. Supercoach, 100% AFL fantasy, I pick him, but not for Supercoach. Callahan, yeah, very impressive from what I saw. Big body player and always looked to move forward and was always, getting the 1-2s off the guys like Cogs and moving the ball forward. 2 goals, 22 disposals, yeah, pretty consistent game. And he's had huge raps, I think, in the GWS camp for a while now. So you'll be a bit more doubtful if the likes of Cogs, Kelly, all that weren't there, but they're all there and played, and he still was one of the best on ground. So I think he's worth the risk at 244k or whatever he is, and you save a bit of money going down from Warple, and you can even have him sitting at your M6 if you really want to, and have that assurity of scoring. I think even if he does score pretty shit round 1, I think GWS a pretty a soft first 6 games, so you'd expect a decent score from against Adelaide. But yeah, I think he's one just to keep and kind of reap the benefits, and he's been pretty popularly owned, I think, come round 1.
Yeah, so I'm in the Callahan camp on this one as well. I think Warple, I think you guys have touched the nozzle with Warple out with his disposal efficiency. I'm not really sold on Callahan. I would have loved to have seen him go into centre bounces, but he didn't attempt one. So that's the only slight knock I have on Callahan, is if he's stuck out on the wing for the whole game, what does that do to his scoring, given that traditionally wingers don't really score that well? But yeah, it's hard to knock the way that he played on against Gold Coast. He was brilliant. But yeah, that's probably my only slight concern, is that if he doesn't kick goals, what's that going to do to his scoring? But yeah, 245k or whatever it is, I don't think you can really complain about that. And yeah, as Jonas said, they do need to start blooding some of these younger players, the Giants. Otherwise, they're going to end up in a situation where all of their players are wanting to leave again. So yeah, I think for mine, I'm in the Callahan camp along with you two. Rux, so Gawn v Wits. So obviously Gawn 153 Supercoach points and Wits 101. Thomas, I might give this one to you. Who are you picking out of these two, and why?
Well, I don't have either of them in my team at the moment, but I've been, tough one. I'd probably, from what I saw from Gawn, I'm going to go with him out of the two, I think. If I'm going to put it on a limb, I don't know if Jonas and Nathan are going to disagree with me, but yeah, what I saw from Gawn was crazy good. Now, obviously, he's not going to get 3 goals to every game. But yeah, he didn't have that many hitouts. Share the hitouts with Grundy, so he isn't reliant on hitouts, but he just dominated along the ground. I think having Grundy there alongside him I think it helps him negate the pressure off him a little bit. There's times in games last year where it almost felt like he was forced to really do a bit too much as a ruckman and, be like a Rowan Marshall and be everywhere in the contest. But yeah, we're having Grundy there helps as well. He can kind of do what he does best and sit behind the ball in defence and just take intercept after intercept. Wits, obviously, he's priced accordingly. He's one that just trundles along. He's very reliant on hitouts. He doesn't do much around the ground. But yeah, I think if you're looking for ceiling, Wits just hasn't provided that in the last year or so. He obviously broke out the year before, but last year, I owned him and was a bit disappointed. I think I jumped on a little bit later, so I missed out on a few bigger scores. But yeah, just hit out to advantage. Not quite there, or not quite as consistent for Wits as it has been in the past for him. But just watching him live a couple of times last year, just didn't get the ball rolling with him, and I think really struggled to go around the ground with some of the more mobile ruckmen. But Yeah, I've had Wits all pre-season and moved into someone else who we'll speak about next, as a bit of a cheaper option. But I think from what I saw from Gawn, I think he could almost be worth that risk of going a little bit different. But if you want to play it safe, I think Wits is definitely the better option. But if you want to go a little tad riskier, and you already have a bit of that money in the bank because you have gone that Wits and can afford to go 20k up, I think Gawn might be a little bit a bit of a cheeky pod and could really set you up if he dominates in the first couple of rounds, that's for sure.
Where are you leaning towards this one, Jonas? This is probably a bit of a 50. This is probably the most 50-50 one I reckon we've had so far. There's both are genuine options here. So where are you leaning towards?
I sort of disagree to an extent. Gawn's sharing the ruck load with Grundy. Gawn has had two sort of soft tissue injuries in the last 6 to 8 months, and Gawn's more expensive. So for me, I much prefer the Wits option. It's more of a question as to whether or not you go Wits or Darcy, and you trust that Darcy has the majority of the ruck share against Jackson. I just think Wits, you know what you're going to get. Gawn, the only plus side I see with starting Gawn is the fact that he could get forward DPP, but he's going to go down in price. That's 100% going to happen. He'll have some good games, but he'll also have games where he scores 70, for instance, and his price plummets. So I'd rather get him into my team once he's scored 70 rather than when he is scoring 70.
I think Jonas is a fair point. But yeah, I think if you want to play risky, I think you got to bite the bullet a little bit quicker than most. Obviously, you can play the safe game and see how he goes first couple of rounds, but you're stuck in a hard place if he goes shit first round because you can only go down from there. I think it'd be the opposite if Gorm was a price at say 450 and then you're stuck at a mid-price position and can't get anywhere. But if you want to play the risky game, I think, and you're happy with that 600k plus ruckman, Gorn might be not a bad option, but it is risky.
Yeah, so I think this is pretty similar to the Laird v Oliver matchup. I think Gawn has the highest ceiling, but it's probably a bit more up and down in his scoring. And I think Wits is probably the more consistent one. So in that case, I would probably go with Wits, but I do agree with Thomas, and I think there might be someone else coming up where if you choose to have this person and the way that he played in the practice match, I think you could honestly have anyone at R1 and you'll be fine, to be honest with you. But we will see now if he comes up. So yeah, I'm going Wits for that one. In fact, he's not in here at all. So I'm just going to say it now. So I think if you've got Rowan Marshall, I think you can probably take a punt on Max Gawn, to be honest.
Yeah.
If you don't have Marshall, then I probably wouldn't be picking Gawn. But that's just me. So yeah, moving on now. So Darcy and English. So Darcy obviously 127 and 38 hitouts, but Luke Jackson didn't play. And Tim English was probably a bit quiet, to be honest, on what I think a lot of people were expecting. Thomas, which one are you picking out of these two?
I've got Darcy on my side currently. Originally for price reasons, but I'm kind of warming up to him a little bit. I just don't like him playing against Marshall first round. I've got both of them on my side at the moment. So it's kind of like you hope they don't negate each other and both score shit, or they both do really well and they, just rock well for their sides. Darcy, very, very impressive from what I saw. Obviously, it is that awkward sample size where Jackson wasn't there, and then Jackson played forward last time. It's just hard to see what their split will be. I think there's a bit of risk laced in that. I don't think Darcy's ruck time will be significantly affected by Jackson. It's not like they'll chuck Jackson in the ruck full time, play Darcy up forward unless there's an injury concern. Darcy's tap work, from what I saw in the footage, was elite. I think he's got Bargorn and even Paddy Ryder back in the day. I think he's got one of the best tap ruck work in the game. just reads it so well, and he's got an elite midfield. You got O'Meara now added in the mix, and you got Brayshaw and Sarong, so they know each other's games very well. And I think the comparison between Darcy and obviously English and even Witt's in there, his tap out to advantages is what really helps him, and that's where he gets those huge scores, which is really good. English on the flip side is, disappointing from what I saw. I thought I expected a lot more off him. Obviously a tough gig against Goldie, Sherry, Comben, all kind of trioing against him. But yeah, I think it's a little bit disappointing from what we expected from English and the breakout potential. He's always been there. He's been that mobile ruckman that we compare him to Rowan Marshall and the ability he's got. But from what I saw personally in the practice games and last year owning him, I think he just doesn't cover the ground as well as someone like a Marshall and doesn't get his hands on the ball enough effectively. And obviously the other risky part is, as you guys are probably well aware, is his concussion history. As soon as he gets a knock to his head, he's out probably for another 2 to 3 weeks, unfortunately, with how anal they are about with the concussion protocols and for the safety of the player and things like that. So there is a bit of risk attached to that. On the flip side, he's a sole ruck, so, sweet and stuff is not really going to affect him too much. But yeah, I'd say Darcy out the two. First of all, we'd seal him, but just the tap out to advantages really help him quite effectively.
Yep. Same here, Jonas. Are you in the Darcy camp?
Yeah, I'd say Darcy. English has had too many niggles in the preseason and in the past for my liking. And if you're struggling to get through a preseason, how are you going to get through 23, 24 AFL games? I don't see it happening. So whilst Darcy isn't exactly bulletproof, he's in better condition at the moment, and also in better form. So I'd rather bank on that.
Yeah, so the only thing, so I'm going to go Darcy here, even though I've had English for most of the preseason. But the only problem I have with Darcy is, I think with Jackson being in there, I think he's got an impact in the forward line. So if he can impact in the forward line, well, then this is a clear-cut Darcy all the way. Whereas, English is going to be the solo ruck, and he's probably, he sort of broke out a bit last year, but yeah, there's the injury history there. And there's also the fact that he's still probably a bit on the shorter side in terms of his muscle compared to a lot of the other ones, which it can take ruckman, 18 years to get, sort of fully, into the system and whatnot. So, yeah, I think I would go Darcy out of the two, but just with that slight question mark that if he doesn't impact up in the forward line, I'm not quite sure what that's going to do to his scoring. But yeah, anyway, we'll move on. So we've got the forward. So we've got Connor, Rosie, and Goulden. So Goulden just had the ball on the string. And Rosie, I think, probably did enough to cement his place in a lot of sides. I might do Jonas on this one. Who are you picking out of these two?
I currently have both in my team, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably go the safety of Rosie because I think he is guaranteed more mid-time, whereas Goulden, it's a bit of an unknown. You haven't really seen any sustained form from him in the midfield, although you look at his ceiling and it's quite scary, so it's something you don't want to miss out on either. But having said that, I think the Rosie pick is the one that's more likely to work out in the long run. So if I had to pick one, it would be Rosie, and then maybe watch Goulden over the first 2 rounds, see what his mid-split is, and if it's good, potentially jump on then. The only issue in doing that is you're behind the pack. So it's one where it really depends on what your risk appetite is. It almost feels like both these players are highly owned and can potentially go really well. So it's a tough decision, but I think Rosie will outscore Goulden. So I'd be going Rosie. Less competition in the midfield. How about you, Tom?
Yeah. It would be nice if Goulden went under 100 and didn't fucking go 200. And then, yeah, I had him penciled in before the last preseason games as a potential option But unfortunately, the bloke has to get 45 disposals and 3 goals, and basically 1/3 of the competition on him. Unfortunately, it was always going to be inevitable. Yeah, I've got both as well. Same, concur as Jonas. I think if you're forced to pick one, probably go with Goulden. A lot of the teams I've seen floating around have got your likes of Dunkley, Cogs, Rosie. Who am I missing?
Taranto,
yeah. So the ones that people are kind of knocking out are your Rosies or Cogs. Yeah, I think if you want to play it safe, I think Rosie's got the runs on the board. But if you're forced to pick one and you desperately wanted Cogs for whatever reason as that option, or you want to get rid of Taranto, you didn't want to get rid of Taranto and keep those guys, you probably stick with Rosie, stick with Goulden, sorry, and just I think it's gotten to that point now where 1/3 of the competition own him, that you don't want to miss out if he goes bonkers first round. Who have they got first round? They've got
they've got Gold Coast on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, so he's one that could just go absolutely nuts against a Gold Coast side that is known to leak points as well. I'm just saying who they played. They played Carlton pre-season without. Yeah, the problem is they've been playing with Walsh and Cripps, so it's hard to gauge that. But Rosie's mid-split isn't great as well. So it's kind of hard to see. But yeah, if it's toss of the coin, I think with those ones, you ideally want both. But if I was forced my hand, I think you probably afford to take Goulden over Rosie, just considering how much of the competition own him.
Yeah, so I think for these two, I think as you touched on and Jones did as well, I think the most important thing with these two is how much midfield minutes they're getting. So I would have loved to have seen Cullen Mills play in the game against Carlton, just to really, shore up that Goulden's going to be in that sort of first go-to centre bounce group at the Sydney Swans. So I mean, I think both of them will probably end up being around the mark. I think at this stage I'd have to go Rosie just, and that's purely based on his second half of last year, where I think he basically walked into the All-Australian side off half a season. So yeah, I think Port Adelaide really like Rosie in the centre bounce because I think he provides a bit of speed and a bit of X factor in there. But because he's got that forward craft as well, if he gets thrown forward, it means that he might be able to impact the scoreboard. So if you're a midfielder, which is where he seems to be playing, and then you can go forward and impact the scoring, well then that's pretty much the perfect player for Supercoach, especially in the forward line. So, yeah, I think I would have slightly more trust in Rosie. But Goulden is coming. I'm going to say that now. He's coming. And, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he was a top, 4 or 5 mid forward by the end of the year, Goulden. But I think at this stage, I think I would have to favour Rosie just slightly.
Yeah, you've got runs on the board with Rosie. That's
yeah.
thing. Like, even if he plays half forward, the bloke is so clean. 25 disposals, doesn't really correlate sometimes to a 100 plus 110. But when he played in that Pracky game, class above.
Yeah, he was a class above Goulden. So, yeah. So, moving on to next one. So, Turner, Bruin, and Fife. Who are you picking here, Thomas? Which one?
Yeah, Bruin's in my side at the moment. Not with a lot of confidence. I think, he's a bit of a reactionary pick in the fact that he obviously hasn't gone consistently high scores. The Cats love him though. They've had huge raps. He seems like a Joel Selwood-esque replacement for sure. 112 Supercoach points speaks for itself. But from what I saw, he played predominantly midfield. There's not many players coming back in that Geelong side that can take that from him, I think. And he's a big body midfielder from what I saw. and 7 tackles just showed how manic pressure he is. I think he played a bit off halfback as well. Or no, maybe not halfback, even just some man in the back line when he was resting, and he just, manic pressure, just tackle. Didn't give the ball away too often. He was very clean from what I saw as well. So I'd have him over Fife. Fife, obviously, he just keeps doing it, to be fair. That's why, I guess, obviously, other than namesake, he's one that just keeps getting it done. He gets the 3 goals, and, unfortunately for him, I think his ceiling is just not there anymore. He's not going to get 3 goals every game. But 15 goals, 3 goals is 90 Supercoach points. Yeah, just not worth it. I think there's better options out there. You've got even Flanders long as well, which we haven't touched on this episode. For sure is a concern, but yeah, he's in a lot of teams, I think, purely because of namesake and his history of scoring. But the guy's made of tissue paper, so you're guaranteed for him to miss games or be rested. But I think his role is pretty much set in the forward line now with the likes of Brayshaw, Amira, and Sarong in that midfield. But I think, Fife's prime to spend a lot of time at half forward or deep forward. But what are your thoughts, Nathan? Have you got either of the two in your side?
Well, I don't have either of the two, and I would like to thank you for omitting my favourite mid-price forward, which is Jason Horne-Francis from this conversation. If you've been listening to the podcast for a little while, I have had Horne-Francis in my side for probably a couple of weeks. I have had to get rid of him because his role just wasn't there. Look, I haven't had either of these two, and I don't really have a lot of confidence that they can push up into the top sort of 8 forwards, 10 forwards, which is where I think at this price you'd probably want them to get to ideally. Look, just because of the way this is, if I had to pick one, I'd pick Bruin just purely because I think he's got more upside. Whereas I think Fife, if he's not kicking 3 goals in that game, that might only be, 70, 75 Supercoach game. And I don't even think we're having this conversation. So, I think Fife's going to score heaps of goals given his body and his frame and the fact that he'll attract defenders towards him. But, I think if you're in the forward line in Supercoach, you'd probably want to be playing through the midfield ideally, and I think Bruin ticks those boxes. So, I will go to Bruin, but I'm dodging both of these players here.
Yeah,
and we've got a bonus one here.
Yeah, I think this was sent in by, I think his Twitter handle is that negative guy on Twitter. So chuck him a follow. He's got some pretty unique content, but he sent this one through.
Yeah. So Tim Taranto and Tom Green. So this is a bit of a tough one here because this was sort of looking across different positions here. Obviously, Taranto's a mid forward, but you'd probably be picking him in the forward line. Obviously, Tom Green's only a midfielder. Who are you going down this path with, Thomas?
The reason I brought this up, obviously they're in different positions, but the main reason I did actually put this into our episode was because of the fact that a lot of people have contemplated in bringing in or try to squeeze in the 4 primo forwards and a Goulden, and by doing so they've placed someone like a Dunkley in the midfield, and by doing so you're sacrificing someone like a Tom Green. So I think, is Taranto mid-eligible as well? I'm pretty sure. So
forward,
if you use that same logic, and that's why we put them head-to-head, is Taranto pushes into the mids for you guys, for anyone that selects him, and then you're obviously sacrificing, because they're the similar price, someone like Green. I think by that logic, I think it's not worth it, just because of Green's output and any midfielder's output at that point. I think you're risking it big time if you're saying, right, I want to have 4 guaranteed top end forwards. Obviously, that's your logic, is you want those 4 forwards, but you can't afford them, so you dump one in the midfielders in expense of someone priced like Green. Obviously, you could, in an ideal situation, you're going to have both across the forward line and midfield, but I think you're sacrificing a lot, because you obviously, taking into consideration, you're comparing someone like a Taranto compared to someone like a Green or your LDUs or your teachers who are capable of scoring 150 on any given day. So I guess in this case, you just got to go Green if you want to compare them. And to answer that negative guy's question on Twitter, I think Green's the way to go if you want to sacrifice one of the two. I think, as I said, Taranto's going to get enough, I think, possessions from Richmond's midfield, especially with Presti going down that pracky game. But Green has just got the capabilities of going absolutely nuts. And Taranto, I think his disposal efficiency lets him down a bit. That, as we see there, 33 disposals, 8 marks, usually translates to a much better score, like a 130, 140. Obviously, 124 is quite impressive, and he started off quite slow, and they got soundly beaten by Melbourne. But what are your thoughts, Nathan, on that logic? What are your thoughts on that logic and the idea of pushing one of those forwards into the mids in lieu of sacrificing a midfielder?
Well, it's interesting you actually mentioned that, because I've actually flirted with that idea as well of actually pushing one into midfield. I just can't bring myself to do it, and I feel like that's why, because I look at Dunkley in the midfield and I go, I can play him there for 6 weeks, but then you're basically sacrificing someone around his price to play in midfield as a pure midfield. So I'm going to keep this short and simple. I think if you straight comparing them, so Taranto midfielder versus Green midfielder, I would be paying the extra 30k and going to Tom Green. If you're comparing the Taranto forward pick versus Green, the midfield pick, I think I'd be going Taranto. And that's purely because I don't think there's as many key forwards or pure, premium forwards that are on the page at this stage. Whereas with Green, there's always going to be midfielders around his price, who can, score like Green, maybe not as well. But yeah, with Taranto, I think I had a look a few minutes ago. I think the guys around him are like Hawkins, Cameron, who obviously I don't think Cameron's a bad pick, but you probably wouldn't want to be picking him over Taranto. So that's all I'll say on that matter. Is that, I think if you're doing a straight compare Green, if you're going to put Taranto in the forward line, well, then I think Taranto is probably the better pick.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that's all we got time for in this episode. We've tried to keep it a bit shorter, even though there's a lot of stuff we can go through. I know this almost went an hour as well. So, yeah, pre-season content, there's a lot to discuss about, but we're definitely aiming to keep these a lot shorter come round one, given that we're doing most of our, weekly roundups with per team and stuff like that, and match analysis online now and through our socials. But we'll see, how this video is, if it's well received or not, and if people want to continue to see it. I know one person reached out to me asking if we could go through some point of difference players, some real unique players.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
A few up my sleeve, that's for sure. I'm sure Nathan and Jonas have a few tricky ones.
I got a couple.
Yeah, that's something we can look into. We're planning to release this later this week, and if we do the pod or the point of difference version of it, we'll probably release that later in the week as well. But yeah, looking forward to the season ahead. I know Nathan's finalising his team as we speak. But yeah, looking forward to the season ahead, and we'll have our round one team reveals, I'm sure, prior to next Thursday, because obviously the Blues and Tigers up then. But until then, and we'll catch you for the next one.